This time we're diving back into the world of Millionaire. And let me tell you, this episode does not disappoint. If you remember, we left off with Rose in a bit of a predicament, right? That whole confrontation with Lucille.
Yeah, talk about a cliffhanger.
Total cliffhanger. And this episode picks up right where we left off, diving headfirst into the fallout from that encounter. And it's really fascinating to see how the show tackles those, invisible power structures that often dictate how things unfold.
It's like they're holding up a mirror to reality, isn't it? We see these kinds of power dynamics play out all the time, often in ways we don't even realize.
Exactly. And in this episode, we see it firsthand with the whole Heavenly Lion group situation. I mean, the minute Rose's father finds out about Lucille's connections, he completely panics, suggesting Rose spend a night with Lucille to smooth things over. Talk about a desperate move.
It really highlights the extreme lengths people will go to when they feel threatened by a more powerful entity. It's a classic case of those power imbalances we've been talking about.
Totally. And it's not just Rose's father either. Even her friends, who are incredibly loyal and supportive, seem almost powerless against the influence of the Heavenly Lion group. They rally around her, of course, which is amazing to see. Joe, Ben, Susan, Stacy, and Betty, they're all there for her, making calls, trying to find anyone who can stand up to this group. But it's like they hit a wall.
It really underscores the limitations of traditional support systems when you're dealing with such deeply entrenched power structures. Friendship and loyalty are amazing, don't get me wrong, but sometimes they're just not enough to level the playing field.
So true. And then there's Alex. Throughout this whole ordeal, he's like the eye of the storm, just calm, collected, almost like he knows something everyone else doesn't.
His demeanor is so intriguing, right? You can't help but wonder what's going on beneath the surface. Is he completely oblivious to the gravity of the situation, or does he have something up his sleeve?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And as the episode unfolds, we get our answer. Just when it seems like Rose and her friends have exhausted all their options, we get this huge reveal about Alex's background. Turns out, this guy, who's been living a totally low-key life, comes from a crazy wealthy, crazy influential family.
Talk about a game changer.
Right. It's like the whole dynamic shifts in an instant. Suddenly, the playing field doesn't seem quite so tilted.
It's a brilliant way to illustrate that power isn't always about outward displays,
Yeah.
Sometimes the most influential people are the ones operating behind the scenes, the ones you'd least expect.
And we see that play out in a very real way when Alex makes a simple phone call to his family's butler, Mark. And just like that, things start happening.
It's amazing how a single phone call can set off this chain of events, right? It speaks to the power of connections and the subtle ways in which influence operates within these established hierarchies.
Totally. And it all culminates in this scene where a multi-million-dollar business deal is completely dropped, without a second thought, just because of Alex's family name. I mean, talk about a power move.
It's a perfect example of how those at the very top can exert their influence without even having to be physically present. The Whipple effect is incredible.
It's like we're only seeing the tip of the iceberg, right?
Right.
And suddenly you start to question everything you thought you knew about how the world works. It's like that saying, right? It's not what you know, it's who you know.
Yeah.
And in this world, it seems like who you're connected to matters even more.
Absolutely. And this episode really drives that point home, especially when we see how Stacy's attempt to tap into her Uncle Chus network kind of fizzles out. Here's a guy, seems pretty well connected, right? But the minute he hears it's the Heavenly Lion group involved, he practically starts sweating.
I know, right? Even someone with connections has to answer to someone higher up. It's a real eye-opener. And then there's Zane, bless his heart, trying to navigate this whole power game by going through his father, who in turn reaches out to William Chase, the head honcho at the New York City Merchant Union.
A very traditional approach, wouldn't you say?
Totally. Working the system, pulling strings, the whole 9 yards. And for a minute there, it seems like it might actually work. I mean, William's about to close this massive deal, $125 billion, and then bam, one phone call changes everything.
It's such a powerful scene, right? The way the energy in the room shifts, you can practically feel the weight of that phone call.
Absolutely. 1 minute he's on top of the world, the next he's shrinking in his chair.
Yeah.
And the best part, the call isn't even from someone we'd consider conventionally powerful. No government officials, no business rivals. Nope, it's Ken Stokes, who just happens to manage the East Coast division for, you guessed it, Alex's family.
It's a masterclass in subtle influence, isn't it? The person behind the phone call holds no obvious title or authority, yet they wield immense power through their association. It really throws into sharp relief those invisible hierarchies we've been discussing.
Totally. And the best part, Zane's dad is completely oblivious. He's busy patting himself on the back, thinking he's the one pulling the strings, while this whole other level of power play is happening right under his nose.
It's a brilliant illustration of how easily we can misinterpret power dynamics, assuming that what we see is all there is. But as this episode reminds us, the real game is often played in the shadows.
It's true. And while all of this high-stakes drama is unfolding, we get these little glimpses into Alex's personal life. We see him by the campus lake, reflecting on his relationship with Kathy, and you can't help but feel for him.
Absolutely. It's a reminder that even those born into privilege and influence grapple with their own emotional complexities. And it adds a layer of depth to Alex's character, showing us the personal sacrifices he's made to try and experience life outside the gilded cage of his family's world.
For sure, it humanizes him, makes him more relatable. And just when we're getting all introspective, bam, he gets that call from Zara, the cheerleading captain, telling him to get to the West Sports Field, and suddenly we're back in suspense mode.
It's like whiplash in the best way possible. And it leaves us wondering, what's about to go down? Is this connected to the whole Heavenly Lion Group situation, or is this something entirely separate?
Right. So many questions. And the way the episode ends, with Alex heading towards this unknown encounter, you can't help but feel like something big is about to happen.
It's the calm before the storm, And you're left on the edge of your seat, dying to find out what's next for Rose, for Alex, for everyone caught in this web of intrigue and power plays.
It's like they left us hanging off the edge of our seats after that last episode. Talk about a cliffhanger.
Oh, absolutely. And the way this episode picks up right where we left off, with Alex heading towards that mysterious encounter. Masterful storytelling. They know how to keep us hooked.
They really do. But beyond the suspense and the drama, there's this underlying message about power that I find really compelling. Like, how much of our lives are shaped by forces we don't even see or understand?
It's a question we keep coming back to, isn't it? And this episode really drives that point home, especially when we see how easily someone like Zane's father can be manipulated, all because he thinks he has a grasp on how power works.
It's humbling, isn't it, to realize that we might not be as in control as we think we are, and that even those who seem to hold all the cards are often playing a different game entirely.
Absolutely, but I also think there's a sense of hope in that realization, because once you understand that these invisible hierarchies exist, once you start to see the strings being pulled, you're in a better position to navigate those complexities.
So it's not about dismantling the system, but learning how to play the game.
In a way, yes, and Millionaire doesn't shy away from that complexity. It doesn't offer any easy answers because in reality there aren't any. It's about understanding the nuances of power, the subtle ways in which influence operates, and the ripple effects of our actions within those systems.
Well said. And it's that nuanced approach that makes this show so captivating, so thought-provoking. It's not just entertainment, it's a commentary on the world we live in, on the forces that shape our lives, both big and small.
I completely agree. And as we wrap up our deep dive on this episode, I think the biggest takeaway for me is that power is rarely what it seems. It's not always about brute force or outward displays of dominance. More often than not, it's about leveraging connections, navigating complexities, and understanding the unspoken rules of the game.
And that's a game we're all playing, whether we realize it or not. So next time you find yourself questioning the motivations behind someone's actions or wondering why things unfold the way they do, remember those invisible hierarchies, those power dynamics that often dictate the course of events. Because Millionaire reminds us that sometimes the most influential players are the ones operating in the shadows, the ones we least expect.
Well said. It's a powerful message, and one that I think will stay with us long after this episode ends.
Absolutely. And with that, we'll wrap up this episode of Millionaire. We hope you've enjoyed this journey into the world of wealth, power, and the intricate web of relationships that bind us all. Until next time, keep those brain cells buzzing, and remember, the truth is out there, often hiding in plain sight.